Welcome to another edition of the Covid Resilience team interviews. This week, we're talking to Charlotte from Stand With Us to chat about her experiences with COVID and really how Stand With Us is taking on this global pandemic. Charlotte, we are so excited to be chatting with you today. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and to be able to share with our Israel 21C family a lot of what you're doing and Stand With Us is doing. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Can you just tell, whoever's watching a little bit more about yourself, what exactly you do, and anything, you're willing to share?
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Charlotte Korchak. I have been working for Stand With Us now for almost 11 years. It'll be 11 years in April. As you can tell, I'm an American, born and raised in Los Angeles, but I did make Aliyah with my family when I was 9 years old. So I lived in Israel for 5 years, from between the ages of 9 and almost 15. I lived in Israel during the Second Intifada. It started about 3 years after we moved there. So much of my kind of introduction to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in Israel, all kind of started there. And then unfortunately, my family had to leave as a result of the Intifada because the economic crash in Israel. And so we moved back to the States, and I finished up high school in America. And it wasn't until I went off to university that I first encountered anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, and really dove into this world of Israel education. I became involved with Stand With Us. I became an Emerson Fellow like Emily was, way back in the day when I was a junior at USC. And then a year after I graduated, I started working for Stand With Us, and I've been with them ever since. Today, I'm the senior educator for the organization. So I teach inside of Israel to students who are visiting Israel from all over the world. And I also have the amazing pleasure to get to travel to different Jewish communities and different communities around the world to teach them about Israel and help them better understand the situation in Israel and how they can be active for Israel in their communities. So that's a little bit about me.
So could you just explain for those who don't know what Stand With Us is and just more about the organization itself?
Sure. So Stand With Us is an Israel education organization. We were founded back in 2001, really when we saw anti-Israel, anti-Zionist rhetoric increase dramatically on college campuses in the United States, but really around the world. And the reason for that was simple. There was a lot going on in Israel. It was the Intifada. There were suicide bombings. There were a lot of other terrorist attacks as well. And with that, there was also a very intense response from Israel to try to prevent terrorism. And so Israel was kind of on the news very consistently, and that brought out a lot of anti-Israel rhetoric on the campuses. And so that is where Stand With Us started. We really started by educating students on the ground in the United States, trying to help them, give them the tools and the knowledge that they need to counter that anti-Israel rhetoric. But as time has gone on, we're going to be celebrating 20 years this year. And, a lot's changed. We've realized that, we started out very responsive. Stand With Us is now a very proactive organization when it comes to education. We're out in many different spheres, from the social media sphere, but across the social media sphere, from Facebook, the old school social media, if we can call it that now, to TikTok, the very new social media that I, at this moment, refuse to get on. Maybe that ages me, but I just will not do it. So we're obviously in that sphere, but also, we started down on campus. We've now expanded down into high schools, down into middle schools. And of course, that's not going to be education that's responsive. It's going to be education that is just necessary for the young Jew, the young Zionist, and really any young person who wants to better understand Israel, the US-Israel relationship. So we're an education organization. And of course, as part of that, we also have to combat anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. So we do a lot of that work as well. We just recently launched a center for combating anti-Semitism for this purpose. And so that's our sphere is education and activism through education, through giving people the facts. Stand With Us is a nonpartisan, non-political organization, meaning when we educate, we don't educate about one specific way in terms of Israel, one specific solution or one perspective. We really try to give our students a wide range of perspectives along with the facts so that our students can actually come to their own opinions, come to their own conclusions. But we just want to make sure that students are informed. And so when they do form those opinions, that they're informed opinions, and that they have kind of the full picture so that they're able to make that decision on their own rather than being kind of pushed in one direction or the other. So that's really important for me to stress. As senior educator, I've tried my hardest to make sure that when I educate, I'm not pushing one narrative or one perspective, but I'm really showing students the full picture to the best of my ability and usually the short time that I have with a group. But That's Stand With Us in a nutshell, which really wasn't in a nutshell because I don't know how to keep things short, but I'm going to try from now on.
No, you're all good. And I think that that's the beauty of like the Stand With Us organization, is that like they're willing to, sort of like tell all sides and show all sides and do, just like, and not be an organization that's like, no, you have to believe X and do Y and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm such a believer that, if people feel like they have to leave something out, if people feel like they can't be transparent about something, then that should make you question, right? It should make you question what you're believing in. If you feel like you have to ignore something or leave something out because that might hurt your cause, well, then question your cause, And so I always say, when it comes to Israel, you can be transparent, you can be fully honest, fully open about everything that's going on. And I still adamantly believe that people will come out being pro-Israel. They'll also come out being pro-Palestinian, which they should be. And hopefully they'll come out being anti-terrorist, which I think we all should be, because I think everyone, I think we could probably agree, should be against the killing of innocent civilians. So yeah, I love that about Stand With Us too. It's definitely one of the reasons I've been able to, stand by this organization and have them stand by me for so many years. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, so before we get into a little bit about like how Stand With Us has been dealing with the global pandemic, we want to sort of chat a little bit about how you have been dealing with it. So if you want to just go into sort of like, obviously, you have traveled a lot, you actually basically, sort of in your job title is to travel. Yeah. So how has like COVID impacted that, and how has it just impacted your personal life in general?
Okay, so to start with work, it definitely impacted work. I, over the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've really started to travel a lot more for work. I go on at least 6, 7 speaking tours around the US or the UK or somewhere else in the world, usually throughout the year. This past year, I was supposed to, my last trip that I went on officially for work, where I was actually doing lectures in person. I was in the States, and then Scotland, and then England, and then Cape Town, South Africa. And I landed home from Cape Town, South Africa, expecting to return to South Africa a month later, which was supposed to be in the middle of March. And of course, a week before, everything got canceled. And it was supposed to be Johannesburg and Cape Town, and then a trip to the US and touring across the United States. And then later on in the year, there was potential that I was going to go to Australia, possibly New Zealand, possibly then after that back to the US, and then the Netherlands, Germany, another UK tour. It was a lot. It was a lot that was all of a sudden everything just kind of was like, okay, what now? And in Israel, when I'm not traveling, I'm usually meeting with groups. This summer, I don't travel. I stay in Israel because Birthright's coming, and all these youth movement programs come, from B'nai Akiva to NCSY to BBYO and Ramah, and just the camps. There's so much to do over the summer in Israel. And then there was nobody there. And so I had to get creative. I'm not going to lie, I took a little bit of a break in the beginning, because if anyone knows me, they know I was just go, go, go. I actually remember thinking when I was in Cape Town and I was looking forward, and I was thinking, wow, I have 3 weeks home, and then I'm going to go on this another trip, and then I'm going to get back, and I'm going to have the summer, and it's going to be crazy. And then I was like, when am I going to get a break? And then, well, a great pause was handed to me. It was a little longer than I wanted it to be, but there it was. And so I chilled for the first couple weeks, but then it was really just shifting. It was shifting to this. It was shifting to Zoom. It was trying to find cool new ways to engage an audience through a screen rather than in person, which is really not me. I mean, if you ask Emily or anybody else who knows me, like, I'm such a people person, and when I'm in front of an audience, like, that is where I live and breathe. And so I had to figure out a way to do that through Zoom. And luckily, if people's cameras are turned on and I can see them, we can have that connection. And so that was a skill that I think I needed to develop as a public speaker, not just someone who does presentations, but that is my role. So that was a transition, but I think I jumped into it, and it wasn't very hard to transition. Luckily, I have an immense amount of energy, and so it usually translates through the screen, which I'm very, very grateful for. And yeah, I just had to figure out a way to kind of transition and get out of my head, you having to go to a physical place. And so it's been a year now. And I mean, I think there's an element of it that's been really cool. Like, I could say, like, oh, well, yesterday I was in, Scotland, and the week before I was in, Johannesburg, and you could just, you can reach a lot more, funny enough, through Zoom. And so it was a cool transition. I'm looking forward. That was not a word. I gotta stress. I'm looking forward to transitioning back to kind of doing now like a hybrid of being able to travel, but also being available on Zoom for people who can't afford to bring us in, or, I can't fit it into my schedule or whatever it is. But there was a big transition. Stand With Us also did a lot. I mean, Stand With Us immediately jumped. I mean, thank God the infrastructure was basically there for us to be able to just shift to an online platform. We launched Stand With Us Live, which is all of our live shows. We did them weekly early on when people were just stuck at home in quarantine. So people really appreciated it. I actually had the pleasure of launching that program. I got to do the first ever show on Stand With Us, what was called Stand With Us Connect, what is now called Stand With Us Live. We launched Stand With Us TV, which is a platform online that you could just go to. It's like a Netflix, but all Israel and Jewish content. It's super cool. StandWithUs.tv that you could sign up for. And it's free. And we did shows on there, and we still are adding content to it on a consistent basis. And then a project that I was working on throughout the summer with many of my colleagues was rebranding Stand With Us Connect as a menu online of all of Stand With Us's programming that is available, that can be delivered online on Zoom, really, if you're anywhere in the world, from a lot of different Stand With Us staff members. And then also as a menu for in the future, right? That if you want us to come to your campus or come to your high school, speak in your community, this is a way that you could go and check out everything we have to offer, which is a lot. I mean, there was a lot that went into that. So you can also check that out at standwithusconnect.com. And so Stand With Us really shifted, and we boosted our social media, and we just, really worked with what we could to continue to reach our audience. And luckily we have an amazing, solid donor base and backing that really saw the importance of our work and didn't, bail on us, and really said, we're with you, we're going to stay with you, don't worry. And so we all kept our jobs. Mostly the organization is actually doing really well compared to, I think, a lot of other Jewish or pro-Israel nonprofits that have really struggled. I think we're very, very blessed at Stand With Us to have a very solid support. And I also think, it really highlights how, if you're going to look at the organizations that you're contributing to, you're really going to keep the ones that you see are doing the work. And I think that is Stand With Us. I'm not commenting on any other organization, but I know, you see our work and you see how far it goes. And I think you see how much we really use donors' money for the right things. They're put in the right place, and they're used to continue to do our work and spread our reach. So it's been a crazy journey in terms of work, but we've really managed to adapt and evolve in a positive way. All things that I think are going to stay with us and continue to grow even after we've kind of been able to I don't know what the next step, I don't know how to say return to normal, because I don't think it's ever going to be normal again, but the next step. That's professionally. Personally, the beginning of COVID was really not that bad for me. Again, I think I needed the break. I needed the pause. I really enjoyed kind of the time to myself, being able to just hang out and chill and, yes, do work, but like in the comfort of my own home, which I don't really get to be in very often. And unfortunately, though, after, God, what was it, like 10 months, when I returned from a long trip in the US in October, November, and I got back to Israel, and I was quarantining, and my roommate was abroad, and I was alone. And I'm very open about this. So I'm going to be open about this because I think more people should be open about this, but I suffer from clinical depression. And I think, like many people, I wrote it out for a long time, and I was really good. I was very mentally healthy, and I got back and I got into very negative routines. It's very easy to fall into negative routines when you're alone in your home. You can just stay in bed all day. You stay in pajamas all day. You don't have a regular sleep schedule, a regular eating schedule. You don't go out as often. So you're not getting those boosts of vitamin D, the immunity boosters, the positive mood boosters. And I just sunk into a depression episode that really creeped up on me. I wasn't expecting it. I haven't been in an episode for many years. But yeah, I 7 weeks or so powered through that, figured it out. And I'm one of those, I don't really rely on medication when it comes to my depression. I try to identify it, and then I know tools that I can, take steps that I can take to kind of pull myself out of it. And so I've been in that process for the last month, really, since I've been on this trip in the United States, which has been really, really healthy for my mental health, but also being aware of it, being conscious of it, I think, and being able to speak out about it is probably the number one most important thing. And that's why, I saw that this was one of those things that was happening around the world. And I just thought we need to talk more about it. We need to be more open about it, because once you say it out loud, it's like all of a sudden everything changes. And so you just have to say it out loud and realize that it's not unusual. So many people deal with mental health issues, and they might look like the most put together person in the world, and you just never really know what's going on down below. And so I just think people should be more open with it, and the more open we are, the easier it's going to be for us to then be able to overcome it and really power through and have support from our family and our friends to be able to do that. I loved it early on. I really did reconnect with a lot of people, and I was on, FaceTime calls with like my four of my siblings, like things we had never done early on in the pandemic. I really saw like there was because I wasn't in that, and I was in such a positive mental place that I was like, I wanted to talk to people. I was calling people all the time. I was doing FaceTimes all the time. This past few months when I got home, it really wasn't like that. So, we all have our ups and downs, but I think we all need to be open and honest about really the challenges of being alone, or, being in this very different environment than what we were all used to prior to February of 2020. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. Really, it's definitely takes a lot of courage. And you're right, we definitely should, talk about it more. I think mental health definitely has a huge stigma around it, but especially now, I think COVID has made us all realize that, we're not alone in this, right? So with that, then, do you have any advice for people who might be mentally struggling during the pandemic?
So I'm not a therapist, so I don't want to I'm not going to put out any professional advice, but, I've been dealing with depression since I was a kid, and I've had my ups and downs, but the last few years it's been really easy and very positive. Just, I haven't really gone into a depression episode. My advice is, one, know the signs, try to see the signs where you're going into an unhealthy place. That, I think, is a big one. You can even notice if you try to start to rationalize it, which is what I was doing for much of that, like 7 weeks, is I was just rationalizing it. Well, there's nothing else for me to do, so of course I'm in bed. Or like, why should I get up and get more clothes dirty? Why don't I just stay in my pajamas? Like, just stupid rationalizations that you really need to acknowledge, dude, this isn't healthy. And that's hard, but I really genuinely do believe that the first step is acknowledging. Once you actually, again, say it out loud, it changes everything, because then you know what you're facing. Now, for me, I can't speak to others, but depression manifests for me as a lack of motivation. Everything kind of feels a lot harder than it really is. Even picking up the phone and making a phone call seems like the biggest task in the world. And so I think once you acknowledge it, you start to realize, okay, everything is going to be a little bit harder, and you're going to have to make a little bit more effort, and you kind of give yourself that pep talk. And then I think the big thing is you celebrate the small successes. If you got up and you did 10 minutes of yoga in the morning and nothing else, you celebrate that 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And you say, tomorrow, I'll try to do this and one more thing. And you just got to take every little thing as a success, and don't beat yourself up if you don't manage to do that one day. Right. And then really, I mean, know your support system, know who you can reach out to and talk about these things. Know that there are so many resources out there that are not, if you don't feel like you can talk to your circle about this, if you don't feel like there's somebody in your life who would understand it, there are so many resources in every country that provide that, where you can, call into a hotline and really talk to somebody. I mean, online, there are resources. So I think the biggest thing is, if you notice, that you're in a bad rhythm, that you're in a bad routine, that, you're not doing things the way that a normal person would be functioning, ask yourself what's going on, identify it, and then work at it. And don't beat yourself up. Work at it slowly. And again, reach out and use the resources that you have available to you.
That's really great advice. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very powerful. I want to know from that, you talked a little bit about how like the beginning of like the quarantine, and like in March, it wasn't that bad for you. And then obviously when, towards the end, like in October, November, like it got a little bit worse. But like, what do you think of like the single like thing, like a single thing that was most helpful for you just to help you like get through this all?
I think for me, it was my past experiences, like of knowing, of being able to identify this. I think the longest depression episode I ever was in was my senior year of college. It was actually started towards the end of my junior year, and it went on until the beginning of my last semester in college. So basically from like February, March until like January of that one year. And I learned after that with depression, with mental health, it's an episode. It's almost like you're in a downward spiral. And the sooner you can catch yourself, the easier it'll be to pull yourself out, right? Obviously, the deeper you go, the harder it is. And so I think my past experiences of finally being able to click in and say, oh, this is a depression episode, because I've gone through that before. I know what that's like. I think the hardest thing is that if this is manifesting for the first time for somebody, it's very hard to identify those things. And so for me, I think that made it a lot easier. And then because I've dealt with it before and I know how, or what at least will kind of pull me out of it, then I know to take those steps to try to work to pull myself out of that kind of downward spiral. And so I'm able to usually catch it before it gets so bad that then it becomes like you're clawing to get out, and it's a lot harder. Yeah, it's so funny actually, to bring it all back to Israel. The thing that actually got me out of it when I was in college, my senior year, was Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. The operation against Hamas in Gaza, the first big one. And I know that might sound ridiculous. People listening might be like, what? How did that help? But I was, so I had been vice president of the Pro Israel Club for my sophomore and junior year. My sister was president for those 2 years. And so we had created the organization together, or recreated it, I should say. And so come my senior year, and I'm deep in this depression episode, but it was like obvious that, Abby, my sister, graduated. So Charlotte was going to take over to be, president. So here I was, my first semester, and I did nothing. Like, here's this thing that was like my passion in life, but I was so depressed. And it kind of clicked when Operation Cast Lead happened. And then I realized I'm going back to campus. And if I don't do something, nobody's going to do something. And I know there's going to be a lot of anti-Israel rhetoric, because that is always what had happened when there's an operation. It gets, anti-Israel rhetoric gets worse on campus. And so it was just like something went off in my head, like, this is bigger than you right now, and you got to pick yourself up, and you just got to go and you got to do it. And so I stepped back onto campus that last semester, and I was like, not only do you got to now set up, rallies and make sure that like any anti-Israel stuff that's happening, there is a response, but also you need to recruit so that you have a board and you actually have an organization once you graduate and you leave a USC. And so as weird as it is, it was really Israel stuff, that passion that I had, this thing that again was bigger than me, that was more important than me and my current reality, that really pulled me out of it. And so I guess maybe that could be advice, that if there is something out there that's bigger than you, that you care about so much, that you're so passionate about, that will draw you out of that kind of slump that you might be in, something that you love so much that will get you out of bed in the morning, And I got to say, throughout those 7-8 weeks, between November, the late November when I got home, and mid-January when I came back to the States, the one thing that I kept doing every day was, if I had a lecture to give, I was up on Zoom giving that lecture, even if the bottom half was my pajamas and the top half was the same shirt that I had been wearing for every presentation that week, like this one where you can't tell what I'm wearing. That's what I did. And so I thank God, I think I'm also lucky that I have a passion in my life that really drives me every single day, that no matter what, even if, yes, my first meeting might be at 3:00, whatever, I'll get out of bed at 3:00, but I will get out of bed. And I think for some people, they might not have that. And that would make it a lot harder. But you've got to find that thing in your life that will get you going. I'm ready.
During this pandemic, I feel as though a lot of people have learned something about themselves, right? Whether that is self-growth or just something that has been, getting them through the pandemic. Like you said, passion, right? So is there like a point in the pandemic that you felt like you realized something about yourself that you didn't know before? Like whether like this pandemic, like you realize, oh, like I'm very adaptive, or something along those lines.
Interesting. So I already mentioned one of them, which, that big fear of I'm a public speaker. I get energy I get energy from my audience.
Yeah.
I love to connect with people. And I think learning how to do that through technology is an extra step. And I think it was very cool to see how easy it was to for me to translate what I do in person to be online and still be able to connect and still have people kind of remember you and have that impact, so that was really cool. And I think the other thing was I think I really learned that I need to do a lot more on using technology. That yes, it's great, you can go around and you can speak, but you also know that you can, post something on Instagram and you can reach, 400 people in one fell swoop, and you should do that more, because why wouldn't you be, right? And so I started to realize like that there were certain things holding me back from not wanting to engage more on social media or be more out there on social media, and certain things that I've also now overcome at this stage. Early on in in my, I don't know, my career, I guess, a lot of people were saying like, be on social media, become a public figure. Just the term of public figure makes me cringe. And I don't know why. It shouldn't. It's just, I've had negative experiences in the past with certain individuals that really turned me off of that whole sphere. And then the other factor was dealing with the constant criticism. I don't think people realize when you're out there, might get a lot of praise, but you're going to get a lot of criticism and people who just want to rip you apart to rip you apart. And I think for a long time, I was very afraid of needing to deal with that on my own, because I am single. Yes, I have a roommate, but she's more a roommate. Yes, we're cool with each other. We're friends, but like, she's not someone who I would go to and like cry in her arms when somebody like is just ripping me apart online. And I felt like I just wasn't prepared to kind of handle that on my own. And now I'm in a totally different mindset. I'm like, bring it on, criticize away. It's fine. I can deal with it. And so actually, I think that was a big kind of step for me of being now willing to take that next step into the crazy social media sphere and really put myself out there, and be open to, the criticism, the feedback. I appreciate the constructive criticism. I'll say that to anyone who follows me and who, watches videos. I always appreciate the constructive criticism when people, share facts with me that I didn't know, that I haven't introduced. Like, that's always amazing. And that's why I tend to read the comments. And then there's always that schmo who's just like, oh, this person's stupid. And I'm like, I'm not going to take that. Like, why was I afraid of this? Like, I think the worst criticism is when it comes from your peers more than anything else. And it's never coming from people in this sphere. So that was, I think, a big one for me. But again, the pandemic forced me to kind of step out of my comfort zone and do something different. And I love that about it. And again, I'm excited to kind of go back and figure out like a hybrid of what I've been doing for the last year and what I was doing before. Because before I didn't have any time, I felt, to do anything else. And now I feel like no matter what, I'm going to have to force a way in so that all of it will fit into my schedule. And I will make time for all of these very important things. I don't know if that answered your question. That was the best that I've got, though.
Yeah.
I also learned that I don't have to blow dry my hair every day. If you want some personal, today I actually did, just for all y'all, because I was like, I'm gonna get a little pretty, but literally I used to blow dry my hair every single day. At some point I was like, why am I doing this? This is stupid. And now I just let my hair dry naturally, and it's pretty cute.
It looks good.
Total side. Today I actually did blow dry it, but usually almost like this, just a little less, put together. Anyway, stupid, but also super healthy for my hair. So why not share it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. I definitely, I mean, again, like today, like I blow dried my hair today too, but I usually am, more of like the natural type, just because like, why the heck not? So.
And also, yeah, you're just like, I'm killing my hair. It doesn't. So anyway, yeah, that was fun. That was a fun transition. How I'm much more comfortable to just be like, all natural, instead of feeling like you got to get really. Also on Zoom, I have to say, it's so much easier I mean, again, I got a little bit more, fancy for all y'all, but usually like I can get on without any makeup, with nothing, and I feel totally fine. And that's fun because, when you go out, you have to get all done up and look real profesh. Yeah. And it allowed me again to do lectures in my pajamas. One time I was so hot and I was in pajama pants, and I actually took off my pajama pants while I was presenting, and I did a presentation, half my presentation straight up in my undies. And it was one of the most amazing experiences, I have to say. And it's one of those where I can like check the box, like did a presentation in my underwear, and I will have that for the rest of my life.
Right.
So yeah, perks of COVID,
True.
doing presentations in your pajamas or when you're warm in your underwear.
Yes.
Yeah, totally
Exactly.
fun.
Exactly.
Totally fun. Yeah.
We talked a lot about passion and sort of how you've been with Stand With Us for a very long time. And we want to know, like, what inspired you to join Stand With Us? You know, why, Stand With Us out of any or of the Israel organizations, and just sort of like take us through that story.
So actually Stand With Us found me. I was very, very lucky. I was actually part of another organization, an organization that brought me to Israel on my first trip to Israel, like my first trip as, a burgeoning activist, if you will. And it was another grassroots organization, campus organization, and I was really kind of stuck to them. But Stand With Us was launching the Emerson Fellowship in 2007, and they were reaching out to kind of the heads, the leaders within the pro-Israel groups on different campuses. And of course, Stand With Us is based in Los Angeles. So I was at the University of Southern California. So they reached out to me saying, hey, we're launching this program. Do you want to apply? Sure, why not? As far as I was concerned, it was like a stipend, $1,000 stipend, to do the work that I was already doing on campus, right? And then I got exposed to this organization, and it was similar to the other organization in that it was grassroots. And at the time, I don't think I really fully appreciated what it really was, to be honest with you. They were both grassroots organizations, one way more focused on activism, with Stand With Us focusing more on education. After I graduated, I actually tried to work for the other organization. And they didn't even give me an interview. I love it because I just feel like they're probably still kicking themselves, but they didn't even give me an interview, and it like crushed me. It was literally like, I got to tell you this story. So it was my last like 2 weeks at USC before leading up to finals. And I'm a psycho and I'm a horrible procrastinator. And like my whole life in college was Israel stuff. School was like secondary. So I procrastinated, and I basically had to do like 5 papers or 4 papers in like 1 week. So I woke up at like 6 a.m. on a Monday, and I didn't go to sleep until midnight on Wednesday. And I'm not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form. I remember this very clearly. 6 a.m. on Monday, didn't go to sleep until midnight, 1 a.m. the following Wednesday, Thursday. I was awake the whole time. I started to hallucinate by the end of this. But on Wednesday morning was Israel Palooza, this big Israel festival that I started at USC when I was a sophomore, and it's still at USC. It happens every year. I'm actually, the t-shirt I wore to bed last night was the Israel Palooza shirt from just a couple of years ago. It's like one of my legacies at USC. And so it was that morning, and I was, of course, like a zombie. Okay. And I'm like driving this like little cart around campus, like delivering food back and forth from the event. And I get an email from this organization saying, you didn't get the job. Even though, again, they didn't even interview me. I didn't even know, like, it was soul crushing at this horrible moment where I like have no sleep. I'm putting all my heart into Israel Palooza. It was just awful. So a week later, I graduated and I was working at a restaurant, and I was like, Billy, to my boss, like, I graduated today. And he was like, cool, do you want to be a manager? And I was like, sure, why not? I've got nothing else on the horizon. So I turned into this manager of this giant restaurant in Hollywood, in California. And I did that for like 10 months. And then something happened there, and I just left, and I ended up going and selling car insurance at a friend of mine's car insurance company, totally serious, for like 2 months. This was my, I would say, year where I buried my head in the sand. I just did something that I did because I needed to pay, rent and pay my student loans. But every moment that I could talk about Israel, I did. And then I got very, very lucky. Stand With Us had hired somebody to run the campus department who I had interned for when I was a sophomore at USC. I had interned at the Israeli consulate. And so she knew me through that. And she called me saying, she messaged me on Facebook, Shar, the campus coordinator at Stand With Us is leaving. Do you want to be the West Coast campus coordinator? And I was like, yeah. And so thank God. I really, and I say that not just saying thank God the way that some people say that. I genuinely thank God that I had that relationship, that I somehow managed to establish that relationship and keep it strong. And because I wasn't looking, I was again buried in the sand. I was not motivated. And if she hadn't reached out to me, God knows where I would be now. But she reached out, and immediately I said, I know Stand With Us. I know what they believe in. I'm all for it. Let's do it. And honestly, it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me, because I managed to somehow get this job. And it's funny, the CEO told me many years later, she's like, you know what got you this job over all the other candidates was your passion. You sat in front of me. I knew you from when you were a student. I didn't do a good job as an Emerson Fellow, by the way. I did a lot of events, but I was terrible at reporting. So I was not a good, so she was like, well, you were a bad Emerson. So why, why should I hire you? This is a great question. And I was like, listen, I've learned my lesson. I'm an adult now. I bit off more than I can chew. This is going to be my whole job. I'm not going to also have school, whatever. But she said, I heard it in your voice that I knew you were never going to stop. Well, 11 years later, boy, was she right. And, after joining the organization and being with it for so long, not only have I so embraced the values of this organization in terms of the education, and again, that other organization, now I look back at it thinking there's so much more an activist organization, which is fine and necessary. It's so needed on campus. But what drives me now is education. And that's why I was a campus coordinator for 2.5 years. But a year and a half in, I was already itching to want to do more education rather than the mentoring that you do as a campus coordinator with your Emerson fellows and the helping with putting on events on campus. It's administrative stuff, it's logistics. I wanted to be teaching. And so Israel happened. I got it. This is another story, but I was God, we were having our big event, our big annual gala, and our director of our Israel office came over, and he did this talk in our office where he just told us about all the work that was going on in the Israel office. And I'm sitting there and my eyes just kind of get wide, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I could do this work and live in Israel. And that was it. I literally, not kidding, the meeting ended. I grabbed him. His name is Michael Dixon. He's now my boss. And I pulled him into my office and I said, Michael, I want to work in the Israel office. And he was like, that's interesting. And within a year, I was working in the Israel office. And my job shifted from being like 20% educating and 80% of that admin, logistics, mentoring to like 80% education and 20% admin. And it's been just a dream ever since. And everything changed, and my job became again educating others, but also educating myself in Israel, being able to go in to not just hear from different Israelis and all the different Israeli perspectives, but also go into the territories and hear from Palestinians from all different backgrounds and hear their perspectives. And so I just so deeply believe in what Stand With Us does. And I don't think it's not a flawed organization. I think every organization has their challenges and things that they need to continue to work at. But I'm so proud to say that I've seen this organization grow and evolve in the 11 years that I've been there. I always joke that I'm like the old of the young generation at Stand With Us. And I've had that amazing opportunity to go from kind of like my young professional into almost my mid-age, and see the progress. A student once said to me, like, well, if you don't like parts of the organization, then why do you work for it? And I go, because I believe in the core. And here's the craziest part. If you work for an organization, you could actually help change it from within for the better. And that's what I've actively tried to do along with many of my colleagues. I'm not going to at all take credit. We've all worked so hard to really make sure that this organization is doing what the mission says: education, nonpartisan, showing all perspectives, and giving students the knowledge and the tools and the agency to be able to decide for themselves, and not sitting there going, your opinion is wrong. No, it's yours. As long as it's rooted in facts, it's yours and it's right for you. It might not be right for me. And I think that takes a lot. I think it takes a lot for people to say, you don't have to think like me. You don't have to think like we do. You can think like you want to think, and then go out and be active with whatever organization speaks to you. And if Stand With Us is that organization, if you want to be that educator who's going to then go out and also not preach a political perspective, but teach those facts, then be a part of Stand With Us. But if you're on the right, go and be a part of ZOA. If you're on the left, go and be a part of J Street. Do what works for you, but do it with a base of knowledge that, again, gives you that confidence to go out and do that work, that very important work that we all need to be doing to fight anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So I can't praise Stand With Us enough. And again, I'm not sitting here with rose-colored glasses because I've seen a lot, but I just think, we just do such great work, and I love to be a part of it every single day. So
That's amazing. I always love hearing your stories. You're a very engaging speaker. I love it.
Thanks.
Is there anything else before we like just wrap it up? Is there anything else that you want to share? Any, more advice, anything?
Yeah, you know what I do want to share? I think one thing that I didn't take advantage of enough, and I of this whole pandemic and everything that's been going on, because we're still in it. Let's be honest. Like, sure, people are being vaccinated. We still got some time until things return to whatever normal is going to be after this. And what I think I didn't take enough time doing was just really immersing myself in more, podcasts and books and reading and getting information. Like, I always used to say, I don't have the time. Well, I had the time. Okay. One thing I did was I reached out to one of my mentors and I said, I really want to learn from you. I want to, like, let's have a chavrusa, as we say, right? Let's have like a learning session every week where we can learn. And this person is not like small cookies. This person is like has been writing books in this field for many, many years. He is someone who is brilliant, who I could learn an immense amount from. And I would say to everyone, you know, I'm used to being in a room with people who are less educated than me. And I don't mean that in a negative way in any way, shape, or form. I'm an educator, so I go into a room where people want to be educated by me. And so I'm talking about in the sphere of Israel, I usually am around people who ask me the questions. And I think we all need to find people where we have those spaces where we're humbled and we just sit and listen to the other people because we know that they are wiser than us and have so much that we can learn from. And so I think also learning to take advantage of this time and reach out to those people who you can learn from. Students are shocked when they message me and I say, well, do you want to just like get on a one-on-one so we can talk this out? And they're like, you'll meet with me one-on-one. And I'm like, yeah, what else do I have to do? Like, what do you mean? Of course I will. And so the same way that students say that to me, I realize my mentors think the same way. They think, well, of course, if you want to meet, like, you're educating so many other people the way that I'm educated. So obviously I'm going to take the time. And so really kind of try to take advantage and see those opportunities and really grab hold of them, because there is going to be a time where things go back and you won't have as much time and you're going to regret not having used this time. So for me, it's not that I didn't work out more or whatever it is, but for me, it's the brain knowledge. It's the time where you could work out your brain and get that information. And there's so much out there. So yeah, I don't know. I just keep thinking about how you can really take advantage of this time before it just somehow slowly but surely is going to start to fizzle away. So yeah, I'm getting onto Clubhouse now. This is the new endeavor. We should all look for new endeavors. So actually tomorrow, stand with us. We're going to be doing our first Clubhouse meeting. The new app that only is available on iPhones, which is ridiculous. But yeah, so do new things and really try to take advantage in the most positive way. And especially if you want to learn, people always ask me, how can I learn more? Read books, read this, but really, I think sometimes we learn the best from other people. And so if you know people who you can reach out to, who will give you that time, take advantage because they won't have that time later on either, and so think of ways that you could just better yourself and your skill set during this time period, using those resources that you might not, that won't be there once COVID kind of, I don't know, again, once we get over this. It's so weird, right? Are you guys with me where I'm like, what's it all gonna look like? Like, I'm celebrating the fact that, like, when I go to very cold climates, that I will now permanently have face masks, and I will wear them simply because I'm cold, and no one will think it's weird because face masks are just gonna become a thing, and I'm just gonna be like, yeah, what? I'm cold, like what? And COVID, so like leave me alone, So like the little things, but yeah, I don't know if that's great advice, but I'm definitely going to try to hone what I just said, for the next few months also, until all of this blows over, to really take advantage of the time that we've been given. So, yeah.
That's a really good point for sure. I feel like a lot of us took the pandemic for granted almost. We were kind of just like, oh, like when is this going, like when are we going to return back to normal?
Yeah.
But like this is really a time for us to just, get more into our own heads and just take time.
And I have to say, I'm saying that, I think we're all saying that, right? As single people who are not married with children, because
yeah,
boy, did they have another experience. And I gotta say, I had never been so grateful to not have children. I am 33 years old and single, and some people are like, oh my, you should start, are you thinking about freezing your eggs? No, I'm not. I'm not. Okay. And I'm enough. I don't need you to tell me. But no, seriously, I was like, if I had children, right, like I'm watching people with children, and I'm just like, oh my, I understand mental health issues now even more. Like it's so I do have to say everything that I just said came from the perspective of a young single person with a job that was consistent, that paid me a salary, that afforded me the ability to do everything that I just said, because we all know that there are people in much different circumstances, people who lost their jobs, people who were laid off, people who really didn't have what to do, who even could be single and then laid off and then really were in like, what gets me up in the morning. And then those who were really bogged down with family and that challenge. And then the elderly who couldn't go out. I mean, it's again, so I have to say, like, my last word would be, I was beyond blessed during this time period. And I think everyone needs to kind of take kind of reflect on your position during all of this, because I kept saying, I am so grateful that I was where I am in my life when this hit, and that I'm not, an elderly person stuck in a room at an elderly facility, not being able to literally see the outside world, or somebody who has 5 kids running around the house and like half of them are supposed to be on Zoom, but you can't, you only got 2 arms. And I couldn't fathom it. So I was very, very blessed with what in my position and what I was able to do throughout all of this. And I think that's where I didn't take enough advantage, knowing the position that I was in. But for everybody else, I gotta say, if you're one of those people who's chasing 5 or 3, 4, 5 kids around, like you didn't have to do anything else but binge watch Netflix when you had some spare time, because holy moly. But for all of us young people, you should really, really take advantage. I felt like I had to get that out, because it's very different, I think, for us than for a lot of other people out there. So yeah. All right.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to, come and speak with us and share your experiences and your perspective. It's always a pleasure having you. I love hearing, what you have to say.
Thanks. It was a pleasure. It was just fun. It was like a totally different kind of topic, but weaving in Israel throughout it, because that is my life ultimately. But yeah, this was fun. So I really appreciate you guys having me on and thinking of me. You gals having me on and thinking about me.